Okay, today we're going to start on Kuf Dalet Amud Beis by words Mechusar Zman. It's below the midway line. It's probably like 1/3 of the page from the bottom. Mechusar Zman. We learned in the Mish. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. And it's about learning. We should have the base of Mikdash immediately. Amen. So we learned in the Mishnah that a zav or a zava or a yeledes, these are people that need to bring a sacrifice, and they had to wait a certain amount of time before they brought that sacrifice. So the rule was that if they brought their sacrifice prematurely, and it was outside, and they brought it outside the temple, so then they would be exempt. And the reason why they'd be exempt was because it wouldn't be eligible in the temple. So the only time you have a prohibition of bringing a sacrifice outside the temple is if it's eligible in the temple. Then we added in, we said that, hold it, 1 second. Some of those sacrifices that they have to bring are also donation offerings. And donation offerings could be brought anytime. So even though specifically this donation offering that he's bringing doesn't satisfy his obligation because it's too early, but the fact that it could be brought any other time of any other day of the year, or any other time for any other reason, like an oila or a shlamim, those donations. So then he would be liable if he offers it outside the temple, even though for him it's premature, because in general it's not considered premature. So we start off like this: Mechusar Zman, chulu. If he brings these people bring their sacrifice prematurely, it says v'hani b'nei Hashem. One of the items that they listed over there is an asham. It says, does a zav and a yeledes bring an asham? So Amar Zeiri says, Tini mitzayra ba'adayo. Throw into that list mitzayra. If you put into the list mitzayra, we know that mitzayra does bring an asham. So that's why it says in the category it says an asham. Now it's interesting that our Mishnah actually has the word mitzayra in there. So what is the Gemara's question and what's Zeiri answering? It's already there. We'll see in a moment. What about the oila, the elevation offering and the peace offering? If that's brought outside and it's premature, but nevertheless we say that it's chayav because those are sacrifices that are not considered premature. Those could be donations. V'hani b'nei shlavim nenu. Does a zav and a zava and a yeledes and a mitzayra, they bring a shlamim? They don't bring a shlamim. So why does it say shlamim? Amar Rav Sheishes Tini Nazir. You have to throw into that list the nazir. Now in our Mishnah it actually doesn't have nazir, so this is like a chsuri mechsra v'hachi ktani. Like the Mishnah is missing a word, and we can add in a word to adjust it. Zeiri kavua tanai. What Zeiri added to the Mishnah was actually accepted in the Mishnah. The Rav Sheishes like kavua tanai. What Rav Sheishes added to the Mishnah was not accepted in the Mishnah. We're only going to do it as a chsuri mechsra v'hachi ktani, but it wasn't accepted into the text. Explained by when you go back to our Mishnah and you see the word mitzayra in there, it's because the Iri told us to put it in, so it got accepted. Okay. Amar Rav Chilkiah, Debei Rav Tuvi, Chilkiah Debei Rav Tuvi. Maybe Amar Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvi. That's common. Chilkiah Bar Tuvi, he taught the following. Leishano, when we learned in the Mishnah that a zav and a zavan, a yeledes, and all of those people that brought their asham, they brought it too early. They brought their guilt offering too early because they were in the purification process. So we said that they are exempt if it was the asham or the chatas. We say leishano ella, that was only taught lishmai. That's only if they brought the offering that was premature. They brought the asham, and they brought it for its own sake as an asham. In other words, everything was correct except for the fact that it was premature. And we say that it's exempt because an asham that's brought, because this offering that's brought prematurely wouldn't be eligible inside. So how could it be chayav for it outside if it's not even an acceptable sacrifice? Aval Shalei Lishmai, but let's say you brought the Yasham, the guilt offering that was brought in this purification process, you brought it for the sake of a different sacrifice. You had intention, not the Yasham, but you had intention an Ayla. Now we just learned in the Mishnah that an Ayla is totally different. We're on 114b, towards the bottom. Ayla is totally different. An Ayla didn't have the problem of being premature, because an Ayla could always be brought. It's a donation offering. This person happens to have a special procedure that comes along with it. So for this, it's premature. But an Ayla, we said, would be chayiv if it's outside the temple, even if it's premature, because of its own qualifications. So we learned through the Chilkei Dverav too. It says, when do we say that an asham is going to be exempt if he offers it outside the temple when it's premature? That's only if he brings the asham for its own sake. But aval shalei l'shmai. But if he brings it for not for its sake, he brings the asham for the sake of an ayla, he's going to be chayav. Because an ayla is eligible to be brought inside the temple. You hear what's going on? When he brings it for its own sake, when he does it correctly, he's exempt for doing it outside the temple because it's invalid. When he messes it up by doing it incorrectly, by doing it for an ayla, now he's going to be chayav because that would have been eligible inside the temple. The Gemara asks, one second. If you can be chayav by doing something so slight, by just changing the intention of, am I bringing this for an asham or am I bringing this for an ayla? So every time you bring it for an ayla, with intention for an ayla, then you'll be chayav outside the temple. Why? Because that's eligible. You bring it for the asham, then we say that you're not chayav because it's not eligible in the temple because it's premature. Because it was he didn't wait the 7 days or whatever. Just 1 second. But the asham is eligible because you could have brought it as an ayla, and that right. So then it should be considered eligible to be brought to this. So you should be chayav just even as an asham because you could have brought it as an ayla. The Gemara says, the Gemara answers by Yakira. It says, but nevertheless, you didn't uproot it yet. So it doesn't get that status by default. It doesn't, until you actually say that it's an ayla, until you actually uproot it from an asham to an ayla, it's considered an asham and it's not eligible. When you uproot it by having the wrong intention, then it becomes eligible. Maske for Rav Huna. Huna has another question on this. It says, is there anything in the world that if you do it correctly, it's invalid, and when you do it incorrectly, it becomes valid? How could this be? When you do it as an asham, so we say, oh, that's invalid, it's premature. So you're going to be exempt if you do it outside because it's invalid. So you do it outside. The only thing that you'd be chayav outside the temple would be something that would be valid inside the temple. But when you do it incorrectly, and you have the wrong intention for the sacrifice, then it becomes eligible inside, and now you're going to be chayav outside the temple. So where do you ever see such a thing? This sounds a little crazy. How could it be that someone that brings an asham correctly it's going to be pasul? It's going to, and if he does it incorrectly, it's going to be kosher. It says, "V'loi." What do you mean? We have other cases of this. Take, for example, we're on 115a on the top. Pesach, what happens to Karban Pesach? If you bring it as the Karban Pesach any other day of the year, and including on Erev Pesach before Chatzos, you bring it at the wrong time, and you have intention for the Karban Pesach. So is it considered a Karban Pesach? It becomes pasul. It's not. So that's it. If you bring it as a Karban Pesach, it becomes invalid. But kosher shalei l'shmai. But let's say you have intention to bring it as a shlamim, then it's going to become kosher. So here we have a perfect example of something that if you bring it with the right intention, it's invalid. But if you bring it for the wrong intention, which is not what it wasn't a shlamim, it was a Karban Pesach. If you bring it as a shlamim, it becomes valid. So we push off Rav Huna's question, where it says it's not such a good teretz because Pesach b'shayim eseshana shlamim nino. It's not considered shaloi lishmai when you bring a carbon Pesach the rest of the year. That is its lishmai. A Pesach during the rest of the year is considered a shlamim. You don't have a real answer to for Rav Huna that we to answer Rav Huna's question. Oh no, we have the precedent for this. We have a carbon Pesach. At any other time of the year is going to be kosher if you have the wrong intention, if you bring it as a shlamim. Says no, that's not considered the wrong intention, that's considered the right intention.
Do they have like has any of these sacrifices have?
What do you mean? Every sacrifice has it's meant to be what it was designated for. For the designation, then it wasn't a sacrifice. Right? It's just an animal. Person consecrates it. He says, I'm offering this, I'm going to take this as my asham. Now it becomes an asham. Right? You take this as an ayla. It's an ayla. Now he takes his asham and he offers it instead as an ayla. So we say that he's going to be chayiv if he did it outside the temple, because even though the asham wasn't eligible, but the ayla was eligible. So because he misappropriated the sacrifice, now he's going to be chayiv, not for misappropriation, but because that's considered a valid sacrifice. If he would have done it correctly, he would have been right.
What is he chayav for?
Shchutei chutz.
No, I mean,
We're talking about slaughtering a sacrifice outside the temple.
Is this malchus? Is it kares? What's he have?
Kares. If it's the full thing, it's kares.
So this is a kohen because there's already the temple, right?
Yeah, probably. Unless it's the owner himself that's slaughtering it.
Is he allowed to once the temple's there?
Yeah, you could have the owner do the slaughtering, but if he slaughters the sacrifice, it would be a problem. Yeah.
No, it's a pretty harsh penalty for this messed up situation.
Right.
And that's talking from a former police officer.
Yeah, I have Rachmanis on these Kohanim. Busy guys.
Yeah, everyone shechted back then. Today we don't know. We have. So he's saying the owner was a shechet. I think everyone back then was a shechet. It was today that you have you go to the today everyone's a shechet. Yeah.
On this side of it too.
There may have been one that was more trained or something in each little village. They would go to him, but I think it was much more common.
Gotta eat. Man's gotta eat.
We definitely did the rest of the process on our own. The cutting out the fats and the malicha and the things. I'm sure that was done more in the house and everything.
Weisskopf did that every night.
Yeah. Okay. Lemam Saile. Let's bring a support for the statement of Rav Chilkiah that says that if I have the wrong intention, I'm actually going to rectify the problem. Yachal Shani Maitze, when the pasuk says Vel Pesach Hayel Meilev, if the sacrifice wasn't brought to the tent of meeting, it says so. Maybe this is excluding Af Oilas Mechusar Zman Bebailim. Maybe it's excluding the oila as well. Let's say there's a zav or a zava or a yeledes or maybe a mitzayra, that all of these people have a certain purification process. They have to wait 7 days, and then they can bring their sacrifices. And the 8th day, they bring the sacrifices. So when they do that, after they wait this amount of time, or whatever, for the Yeledes, it's 33 days or whatever it is. After they wait this amount of time, then they're eligible to bring the sacrifice. If they brought their sacrifices prematurely. So what we were learning was that if it's a chatas or a nasham, then it's going to be invalid, and so therefore, if they bring it outside the temple, they're not liable because it wouldn't be valid. But if it would be an oila or a shlamim, which could also theoretically be brought as donations, and so therefore it's not restricted to this specific case, which means that it's not restricted to bring it premature. It could be actually eligible in the temple, so then you'd be chayav. if it was offered outside the temple. Because in the temple itself, it would be eligible. It wouldn't satisfy their specific need, but in general, it would be eligible. So the Brisa says that maybe we should say that an oilam mechusas man b'bailim should be exempt if it's offered outside the temple, because it's not eligible right now to be brought. But asham nazir, or maybe the asham of the nazir, asham mitzayra, the asham of the mitzayra should also be exempt if it's brought prematurely outside the temple. Talmud Laimar, the pasuk says, shar mikal makim, kesef mikal makim, ez mikal makim. The pasuk says, any man that slaughters an ox, a sheep, or a goat in the camp, I just have to give me all the types of different animals. Could just say that slaughters in the camp. So each one is coming to tell me that it's coming to include an oila, an asham, and a mitzayra, that you're going to be chayiv even if it's premature. Yeah, be chayiv even if it's premature. But it leaves out. Not shaya, shira. Shira means it leaves it out, but it doesn't tell me that you'd be chayiv if you slaughter a chatas prematurely outside the camp. The Mayaskin and the Gemara says, what are we dealing with? You have to be patient over here to get to the punchline. What are we dealing with? Ilema bismana. If we're talking about that it's done in its proper time, so my area asham afilu chatas nami. So why only is the asham chayiv if it's slaughtered outside the camp? Even the chatas would be chayiv if it's the asham was eligible. The chatas is eligible. It's already in the right time. Ela shleilas mani must be talking about that it's within the time. Ubemai. So what was the case? If we say that it was brought for the right sacrifice, then asham amai chayiv. Why should the asham be chayiv? It's not eligible yet. It must be that we're bringing the asham for the wrong intention. This is a very interesting proof. We have a brisa that says that the oila asham or a asham nazir, asham mitzayra that are brought outside the temple will be chayiv even if it's in the wrong time. The problem is that if it's in the wrong time, it's not eligible. The only way that could be eligible is if you had the wrong intention when you brought it and you intended that the asham should really be an oila. Now, who says that would make it liable? Reb Chilkiah. It's right, Reb Chilkiah. Gemara says the oilam. Really, we can say that that's not a good proof because we can explain the brisa. We're talking about the asham that was slaughtered outside bizmani. It's actually in the right time, b'shalei l'shmai, but you had the wrong intention, and it's the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer held Damar Makshina Asham Lechatas. He says that I missed one important detail, that the difference between an asham and a chatas is that a chatas shalei l'shma is pasul. If you have a chatas and you intend to bring it as an oila, so it's invalid. If you have an asham that you intend to bring it as an oila, it is valid. So we were saying that the asham we can rectify if it's in the wrong time by intending to bring it as an oila, and when we rectify it, then you become liable. But the chatas is no rectification if it's in the wrong time, because what are you going to do? Have the wrong intention? You invalidate it with the wrong intention. So that would explain why the chatas was left out and the asham was included, that it would be chayav by the asham, because you had this ability to change the sacrifice and make it eligible by having the wrong intention. Who? Rabbi Lezer?
No.
Oh, we've had him. I'm not sure exactly, but I have to see in conversation. Okay. No. It may be in the other book. This has it says there. It's not necessary right now, but he may be in the 300 list.
Book report due Monday morning.
It's on Wikipedia. Sure.
12 pages of who.
Problem is can't trust.
No, you can't use AI or.
Right. No, he gives you. Wikipedia gives you the reference. Click on the link. It tells you where. Yeah, and when it comes to the Tanaim and Amoraim in Wikipedia, they're usually quoting told us Tanaim and Amoraim from Aaron Hyman, and you click on it and it opens up directly to that page. Wikipedia social media? Is that considered social media? Okay.
We do. We're very
Okay.
no internet.
So the Gemara says we could reject this this proof for Reb Chilki Bar Tuva. We could say Lo'ilam Bismani. Really, we're talking about that the Asham was being slaughtered outside, and it was eligible to be slaughtered. But however, and the whole problem was Shalei Lishmai. Problem with it was that it was slaughtered for the wrong intention, which normally we said that slaughtered for the wrong intention means slaughtered as an oila would be acceptable. But we're following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that says makshinan asham lechatas. We compare the asham to the chatas, and this is a minority view, just like a chatas for the wrong intention is pasul, so too the asham for the wrong intention is going to be pasul. Betana tafel. So when the Brisa told us that the asham is going to be the oila was mechusar zman, and the asham nazar asham mitzayra was for the wrong intention, I could have thought that if it's done outside the temple, he should be exempt. Pasuk says that he's chayav. Tana tafel v'adinikar. The tafel, the secondary thing was being taught. Because before we were saying that when it says this law by an asham, it's to the exclusion of the chatas. Now we're saying no. It's teaching it by the asham, but the asham is the chiddush. But of course, it's going to be the same halacha by the chatas. The chatas is where we got this halacha from. That if you slaughter it shlei l'shmai, it's going to be the carbon was pasul, but nevertheless, bachutz is going to be chayiv. What we're learning now, according to this, is that the learning is that a sacrifice that's slaughtered outside the temple, that's invalidation, is because of your intent, right? So maybe we'd say, oh, well, it's invalid, so then you should be not liable because it's outside the temple. You're still chayav. That's what we're learning. That the intent of the chatas would invalidate it, because if you have intention for the oila, it would invalidate it. So if it's slaughtered outside the temple, where intent of the chatas, maybe I could have thought that you pater. So when the pasuk says no, you chayav. Same thing applies to the asham, that the intent of the asham should invalidate it, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that an asham with the wrong intention is pasul. But nevertheless, outside the temple, it's going to be chayav. Okay, Tashema. We bring a support for Rav Chilkiah. Support for Rav Chilkiah, which means a kasha and Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said that you can't have the wrong intention making an improvement. Maybe I should include oila that's premature, it's being brought premature. And what's premature over here? Begufa means not that the owner isn't eligible to offer it yet, but rather the animal itself isn't 8 days old. It's begufa. It's premature, but it's mechusar zman. It's lacking time, begufa in itself. So it means it's before the time that it's eligible to be brought as a sacrifice. It's within its first 8 days, or 7 days rather. The chata, so it brings a chatas bein begufa bein bebailim, which is also mechusar zman. It's also premature, but it's whether it's premature because the animal is too young, whether it's premature because the owner didn't count the right amount of time. I could have thought that it's going to be chayiv if you offer it outside the temple. To the entrance of the tent of meeting, it wasn't brought. If it's not eligible to be brought inside, then you're not chayiv if you bring it outside. And these are examples of things that are not eligible to be brought inside because they're premature, and so therefore you're not going to be chayiv outside. Now let's take a look at this brisa. What were the two examples? We said maybe it's an oila that's too young, that there's no way of rectifying that, or a chatas that's premature because the owner didn't count, and there's no way of rectifying that because if you try to change the chatas to something else, it becomes invalid. V'ilu asham shaira, but it doesn't mention anything about the asham. So we have a proof. The fact that it doesn't tell me the asham tells me that by the asham you would actually be chayav outside the camp because the asham prematurely would be eligible. Now, how could the asham be eligible prematurely? Because if you have the wrong intention by the asham, then it turns into an oila, and an oila is going to be chayav if it's brought. It's a proof. The Reb Chilkia. The asham shayra.
Professor Lansing.
What are we dealing with? If we're dealing with that, you're bringing it for the wrong intention. So asham nami lifteri. Then the asham should also be exempt if it's outside the temple, because it's not eligible to be brought inside the temple. It's premature. Elalav, rather, why didn't we mention the asham? It must be because it's shalei l'shmai, and by the chata shalei l'shmai is possible, but by the asham shalei l'shmai it would be kosher, so therefore it would be eligible. Gemara says lo'ilam shalei l'shmai b'Rebbe Elazar. Really, we can give you the same teretz, and the fact that it doesn't say asham is because I wanted to tell me it's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. And we're talking about that the chatas wasn't eligible to be brought, and it's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The makish asham lechatas, just like the chatas is going to be pasul if it's shleil l'shmei, so to the asham is going to be pasul. So therefore, you won't be chayiv if you slaughter it outside. B'tani iker kolshken l'tafel. Brisa taught the din by the chatas, and the same halacha will apply to the tafel. That if he's slaughtered outside the temple, he won't be chayiv because it's not eligible to be brought inside. Now, this seems to contradict what we said before. We said before that when the wrong intention is still going to be liable outside the temple. Just 1 second. Let me just take a look at this. Trying to concentrate. Yeah, we're definitely here saying that that the chatas is going to be exempt if it's outside the temple shalei l'shmai. That's what we're talking about, a new case over here. Not that it's premature. We're talking about that it's shalei l'shmai. Saying that the ashram is also going to be exempt. Let me take a look at this article for the last case. If we had the same conclusion. How does this work? You go this way. Just as the chata slaughtered not for its own sake is invalid, so to the asham. Raisa teaches that even though the asham was slaughtered outside not for its own sake, the slaughter is nevertheless liable. So in the last case, we said that he's liable. The fact that he slaughtered outside not for its own sake does not change its designation. It was at the time of slaughtering designated to be brought within for its own sake. Hence, it qualifies as fit to be brought within. Right. So now let's go to this one. This one has an opposite conclusion. In fact, the Brisa is talking about Reb Eliezer. It's understood to be true. Derivative case. Okay. 19. the slaughter is exempt in the case of the chatas because the chatas is not fit to be slaughtered within under any circumstances, not lishma. The only question is that these two answers contradict each other. I'm gonna leave it. But it's gonna be one of those things.
Thank you.
Okay, where are we holding? We're holding by Tashma. Oh, no, I don't need that. Okay. Tashma, come and listen. Yes, Rav Dimi Amar. Rav Dimi was our traveler and he came from Eretz Yisrael. He brought Tana de Bei Rab Levi, brought a brisa from the yeshiva of Rab Levi. Yeah?
Wow.
Yachal Shani Maitzi, Yaf Eilas Mechusas Man B'Bailam. He was in Israel, right? Levi? That is.
A pair of jeans.
Wasn't he in Israel? Yeah. Went there like some brother who died on the Titanic? Was it?
Yeah, Levi Strauss.
He was on the Titanic?
Somebody.
Anyway. Okay. So Tanit Bei Rab Levi. Yachal Shani Maitzi Af Eilas Mechusas Man B'Bailam. Maybe we should exclude the Oila that's premature. It didn't bring the time. Mechusas Man B'Bailam means that the owner wasn't eligible yet to offer it because he didn't count the right amount of time. And Ashim Nazir Ashim Mitzayra. And also in Ashim Nazir and Ashim Mitzayra, you should be exempt from if they're slaughtered outside. Maybe I should be Mamayat, I should exclude these. So in the Gemara then says, the Brisa says that no, we'll include them. My Talmudah. Where are they included from? Ravina says that they're going to be included because it says Shar Mikol Makim, Kesef Mikol Makim, Ez Mikol Makim. It has extra words in the pasuk, and these extra words are coming to include these examples of sacrifices that were brought outside the temple. For some reason, they're not eligible, but nevertheless, outside the temple, you'll still be chayav. Okay. Now, how could it be that the asham should be chayav if it's not eligible? It must be that you offered it shaloi l'shmai, and when you make it into an oila, then it becomes eligible, and then you'll be chayav if you do it. It says, "Hamai Rumya, what question are you asking?" Kidamrit. We already spoke about this, and we already answered it. We said that it's not that we're not talking about that it was premature and you changed it. We're talking about that the whole problem here was the wrong intention, and it's following the opinion of Rabbi Lezer that makes it possible when you have the wrong intention, even by an asham. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman explains that the reason why we're asking this question on Rav Huna and supporting Rav Chilki Bar Tuvia is would say Amar Rav Nachman Mishum the Rami the Tana de Bei Rab Levi the Adatani Levi, because there's a contradiction between what the yeshiva of Rab Levi taught to what Levi taught. Now, did they explain that this is the same person? Is that the No, what I'm asking is Rab Levi and Levi the same person?
It's a different northern pronunciation, southern pronunciation.
Okay, fine.
Depends on the accent. Levi.
Yeah.
It goes like this. Levi taught Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayr, Sheshachten Shleil Shman Ksherin. If a Asham Nazir, Asham Mitzayr were slaughtered for the wrong intention, which means they were slaughtered instead of an Asham, they were slaughtered as an Ayla. They're kosher, but nevertheless it doesn't satisfy, even though they're kosher, which means that the Kayan can eat the Kayanim can eat from the meat and all of that. It's acceptable, but the owner still has to go bring another sacrifice. Shachta Mechuses man b'baylim, if they were slaughtered too early, in other words, the owner wasn't eligible yet. But the Mechuses man b'baylim, it was premature for the owner. He didn't count the right amount of time. Or let's say it wasn't premature, it was after the time. What's the word for that? Not premature, but
Post-mature.
post-mature. Is that a word? If it was too old, v'shachtan, and they were slaughtered psulim. Comes out that we have a contradiction between the two prices. Because before we learned that you'd be chayiv if you slaughtered it outside the temple, and over here we're saying that if they're slaughtered, what are we saying here? Here we're saying mechuses man is pasal, and before we said that if it was an asham mechuses man, the bailam would be chayiv. That's what Reb Dimi brought, right? The price that Reb Dimi brought, mechuses man, the bailam, in an asham nazir, an asham mitzayra, you'd be chayiv bachutz. And here we're saying that you're going to be, that it's going to be pasal, which means you'd be pater bachutz. So Mashani Reb Dimi answered this. Oh, that's why you're telling me that Reb Dimi asked the question. So like kasha, kan lishmai. It depends. If it was done for the right sake, then it's going to be pasal because it's premature. Kan, when do we say that you're going to be chayiv bachutz? That's because shalei lishmai, you did it as an ayla. So this is a proof to Rav Chilki Bar Tuvi that says that if you mess it up, you could actually improve its situation and end up being liable for slaughtering it outside the temple. Rav Ashi Rami Masnisa Abraiset. Rav Ashi has the contradiction between our Mishnah. The Mishnah says that if you shech the nasham bachutz prematurely, you're going to be pater. The Brisa says that if the asham is going to be chayiv. Mishani kan lishmai kan shalei lishmai. The way we'll answer up the Mishnah to the Brisa is by saying that one is talking about when you had the right intention, which that's the Mishnah says, so therefore it's going to be exempt outside because it's totally possible. Other one said that if you had the wrong intention, and then you're going to be chayiv if it's outside, because when you have the wrong intention, you actually improve its situation. They metavitiv to the Rav Huna, but according to these answers, it's the kasha on Rav Huna. Rav Huna says, how could you improve its situation by messing it up, by having the wrong intention? Amlach Rav Huna would say, you know what we're dealing with here? When we said that you're going to be chayiv if it's premature, we're really talking about that you designated 2 sacrifices, 2 asham. Why do you sacrifice 2? Well, just in case, right? It's the man shopping. Buys the extra thing just in case it wasn't exactly the right one. So here he designates 2 just in case he loses one, just in case. What happens to the second animal? So we say that when you designated 2, and one of them was just in case, just to make sure that you don't lose one, so then the second one is automatically an oila. Oh, it's automatically an oila, then you don't have the problem with being premature by an oila. Like Rav Huna says in the name of Rav Huna was a famous student of Rav. Rav Huna Marav, Asham Shnetik L'Riya, an Asham that's meant to go and graze, which meant that it was designated for Achrayas. You had it, you consecrated it just to be safe, and then you went and slaughtered it. Kashalayla, it's eligible to be an ayla. So since this was eligible to be an ayla, so that's why you can answer and say that this type of asham would be chayiv bachutz even if it's brought prematurely because it's automatically an ayla. Okay, now we learned. In the Mishnah, we learned a bunch of other things that if they're offered outside the temple, they're exempt, he's pater. And the reason for this is because in the temple itself, they wouldn't be offered up. For example, the flesh of this sacrifice, which is normally eaten, it's not put on the Mizbeach. So outside the temple, you decided to burn it. So that's not considered an offering. What's the source for this? Tana Rabbanan. Minayin l'mayla b'smi b'sar chatas b'sar rashim b'sar kachim kalim. How do you know that if someone offers up any of these items outside the temple, the flesh of a chatas, the flesh of a nashim, the flesh of any kachim sacrifice, the flesh of a kachim kalim sacrifice, all of these things are not supposed to be eaten. And the what's remaining from the omer after the scoop is taken out, the omer is the barley offering, or from the 2 loaves of bread that are brought on Shavuos, the wheat offering, or maybe from the lechem apanim, which is the showbread. Maybe if someone offers those up outside the temple, or what's remnant from any carbon mincha after the kmitz is done, how do we know that he's pater? Talmud Laimer, the pasuk says, oila, they will bring up an offering. Ma oila shiruya la'alal, just like the offering, that oila, the elevation offering, which is eligible to be put on the mizbeach because it's entirely burnt. Of course, shiruya la'alal, also, the only things that you'll be chayiv for outside the temple are things that are eligible to be put on the mizbeach inside. Minayin shafa yitzik va'abayil va'apaisis va'meleach va'amenif va'magish va'mesader shulchan metiv va'neiris va'kaimitz v'kabel b'chotz shapater. How do you know if you do any of these other services, secondary type services? The pouring of the oil, the mixing of the oil with the flour, the breaking up of the crumbling of the carbon mincha, or putting salt on the mincha, or waving the mincha, or bringing the mincha close, or maybe arranging the table with the showbread, or someone that cleans out the candles of the menorah, if he does any of these things, or he does the kmitza outside on the mincha outside the temple, or maybe receives the blood, not sprinkles the blood, receives the blood outside. How do we know that he's pater? Just like what's the final service is the offering it up on the altar. Of course, the only thing you'll be chayiv outside is if it's the final service. So these are things that there's always another service afterwards, the waving of it, and this you still have more to do afterwards. Actually, Mishkan. Before the Mishkan was brought, we had a historical Mishnah over here. Before the Mishkan was set up, the Avodah would be done by the Bechar, not by the Kayan. It's only after the Mishkan that we switched it. Yasiv Rav Huna bar Rav Ketina Kamid Rav Chizda v'Kakari. Rav Huna bar Rav Ketina was sitting in front of Rav Chizda, and Rav Chizda was reading the pasuk. It says, "Vayishlach es nari b'nei Yisrael." It's talking about by the Matan Torah. It says that they sent the lads of the Jewish people and they brought sacrifices, shlamim. So Rav Chizda explained that it's talking about the firstborn, that they were the one that brought the carbon. Amalei. So Rav Huna bar Rav Ketina says to Rav Chizda, "Hachi amar Ravasi, karvu upasku." You're right that they brought it at the time of the giving of the Torah. The firstborns brought the bechar, brought the sacrifice, but then they stopped because by Matan Torah they already switched it. Nadav and Avihu did afterwards. Savar lasuve masnisin. Rav Chizda wanted to respond back. You see, there's a little discrepancy between is it from the time of the Mishkan or is it from the giving of the Torah? So Rav Chizda wants to respond back to Rav Huna. He says from the Mishnah says that before the Mishkan was set up, it was the firstborns. Shamei de Ka'amar Mishmei de Rav Ada Barava. Rav Chizda heard that when it was said in the name of Rav Ada Barava, he says, Oila Shekribi Yisrael Bamidbar. The elevation offering that the Jewish people brought in the desert before the giving of the Torah, which is referring to by the pasuk that they sent the lads, Eina Tune Hefshit Benituach. It did not need to be skinned or to be cut up like a regular oila would normally be done. And Oisrei Braisa, the Shabi Bekula. So therefore, instead of asking instead of responding to Rav Huna from the Mishnah, which had a certain detail which wasn't exactly the same, he decided to respond to Rav Huna from a Braisa. The Tanya was started in a Braisa actually, who come a Mishkan before the Mishkan was set up. You're allowed to use private altars. And the Avodah was with the firstborns. And anyone was eligible to offer, not eligible, anything was eligible to be offered. Which is, Behema, Chaya, Oif, Zacharim, Nekevis, Tmimim, Balimumim, Tahirim, Avaloitmeim. Any of these animals you could bring up, whether it was even a wild animal. You could bring a deer, you could bring a bird, male, female. However, and you could bring Bali Mumin as well, even if there's a defect. However, it needed to be a kosher animal. It couldn't have been a tummy animal. Every sacrifice that was brought, Hakol Karbo Eilas. This is like the Shulchan Aruch for before the giving of the Torah. But everything had to be an Eilah. And the Eilah that the Jewish people brought by the giving of the Torah, it actually did need to be skinned and to be cut up into pieces. And so that's exactly the Eilah that we brought, that we bring. V'nachrim, non-Jews, they're allowed to bring on a private altar. Now, here it's a question on what Rav Huna said. Rav Huna said that from Matan Torah on, it was already not eligible to bring for the firstborns to bring. Here we're seeing that it was until the Mishkan was set up, the firstborns were bringing. It says Tanai, it's not a problem because it's Machlekes Tanaim. It's a Machlekes Tanaim. There's an argument about this, so you can't ask a question on each one. Each one says, I hold like the other one. The Tanya started in a brayso. Also, the Kayanim that come close to offer sacrifices, they will also be sanctified. But Yeskadasha means that they won't be able. They can't go up the mountain. This is talking about that the Bechar, they're called Kayanim, and they're not allowed to go up the mountain, even though they're so close. But by the giving of the Torah, it was only Moshe. Rabbi Yomer is Uprishas Nadav and Avihu. Rabbi says no, it's not talking about the firstborns. It's talking about Nadav and Avihu. Oh, very good. What we have now is that we have a machlekes if it's the Kayanim that would be offering, or if it's the firstborns that would be offering. Bishleima Lamanda Amar Zuprishas Nadav Avihu, that the Nadav and Avihu aren't supposed to go up the mountain. And what happened? Maybe they got too close, and Nadav and Avihu, they were supposed to go away off the mountain, and they didn't.
How could they both be one?
No, the opposite. Nadav and Avihu are both Kayanim. So the Machlekes is Kayanim versus firstborn. The Nadav and Avihu opinion is the Kayanim opinion, and Rabbi Shua ben Karcha is the firstborn opinion. Right? But according to the opinion that says that it was only the firstborn that was supposed to separate by Matan Torah from the mountain, how do we know that Nadav and Avihu weren't supposed to be on the mountain? So the Gemara says, says, I will meet there to the Jewish people, and I will be sanctified with my honor. Don't read it as my honor, read it as those that are honor, that give me honor. That Hashem was telling Moshe that his name is going to be sanctified through the people that give him honor, which is Nadav and Avihu. Hashem told us to Moshe, but Moshe didn't understand until the sons of Aaron died. So once they died, Moshe says to Aaron, the reason why your sons died was to sanctify Hashem's name. When Aaron then knew that his sons were those that giving honor to Hashem, that means that Aaron was silent. And also by David it says, be silent to Hashem, even though Hashem is killing people. You should be quiet. Doim Hashem means to be silent. Shlomo says in Kelis, there's a time to be quiet and there's a time to speak. Some person's quiet and he gets reward for being quiet. They hire a speaker, doesn't speak, they pay him. Sometimes that he speaks and he does get reward for speaking. Hashem is awesome from his sanctuary. Don't read it from the sanctuary, rather from those that give him honor. Then when Hashem does judgment with those that are holy, so then Hashem is made more awesome. Elakasha Ayla, but what do we do about the Ayla that they brought that didn't need Hefshet V'Nituach, that didn't need to be cut up? It says Trei Tanai, there's two Tanai about this Ayla. Tanya was starting Rabbi Shmuel Klalis Nemra b'Sinai. The general laws of the Torah were given at Sinai. However, pratis, the details of the halachas, Bayil Mayit. This is going to take a lot more to discuss. The details were given at the 10th meeting later on by the Mishkan. Rabbi Kiva close to Pratis Nemrasina Vinishtan Bayil Mayit Ristal Shabar V'Smayim. Rabbi Kiva says that all the details were given originally, so therefore all the laws of the Oila were given, and it didn't. According to Rabbi Kiva, the Oila needed to be cut up, just like the laws of the Oila later on. According to Rabbi Shmuel, they didn't have all the details back then at the giving of the Torah. They got all the details later. They were up to Amar Mar. Yeah.
Where on the page are you?
So 3 lines from the bottom. Amar Mar in the middle of the page.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the last few pages they decided to give us some Agadata.
No comments.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Good Shabbos.